There's just something inherently cool about big mechanical suits of armor, hulking pieces of metal the size of a building that are able to effortlessly dash around with grace, defying the laws of physics. Despite that, while the mecha genre is a staple in Japan, in the West it's not something you see as often unless it's a small reference somewhere, and it's not hard to see the reasons for it. Once the novelty of a giant mech wears out, you are often left with a story that's bogged down by overly complicated and confusing politics, since how else are you going to justify a superweapon being created and used? As such, unless you're Gundam, most mecha series tend to really just come and go with little attention or fanfare. Well, today I want to go through my personal favorite mecha series that encapsulates a lot of what I enjoy about the genre, and is a series that got snuffed out before it really got to fully explore its potential. The series in question is Konami's Zone of the Enders, or ZOE as it's often abbreviated as, and over the next few videos we will be looking through not only the two PS2 games that most people have probably heard of, but also at the lesser known Game Boy Advance spin-off, as well as the even more obscure anime. So let's start at the beginning with the very first Zone of the Enders game. Developed and published by Konami, it originally released in Japan on 1st of March 2001, with the rest of the world getting it later the same month. It was most famous for being that one game that had the demo of Metal Gear Solid 2, which seemed to contribute a lot to inflating its sales numbers, selling 800,000 copies on its debut, but consequently resulted in an estimated 40 to 72% of people returning it, despite critically being received quite well. It's not surprising that there were a lot of people who just wanted to play MGS2 and never had interest in Zone of the Enders, but it's still quite a staggering return rate. It makes a bit more sense when you realize that the full game might as well be a tech demo itself, as it's only about 5 hours long, not really that much longer than the MGS2 demo included, and the whole thing does really feel like it's just set up for the sequel. While it released on the PlayStation 2, the game originally entered development for the PlayStation 1 and PC, although they never planned to release the game on those systems. Funnily enough, the early builds of the game were actually made on the Dreamcast, due to it being much easier to develop for than the PS2, with the Dreamcast using the C programming language as opposed to the PS2 assembler and machine code. Despite again never intending to release it on the Dreamcast, it was revealed by the game's mechanical designer, Toshio Noguchi, that the original codename for the project was Mega Driver, a term that was used to refer to hardcore fans of the Sega Mega Drive console, or Genesis if you're from America. Eventually, this game, as well as its sequel, would receive an HD update for the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 in the form of Zone of the Enders HD Collection, which released originally on October 25, 2012. This version did release with a lot of issues however, such as inconsistent frame rate, which was already running between 10 and 30 FPS, only being 720p, and not featuring some visual effects from the original version. Thankfully, it was eventually patched to bring it up to the at the time modern standards. For this video, I'll be playing through the original PS2 version, just because I never got a chance to try it before, but both are pretty much identical in their content. Unfortunately, these are the only ways you can play the original game, as unlike the sequel, it never received a PC port or any other kind of update to modern consoles. Okay, let's reel it back in a bit and actually talk about what is Zone of the Enders. Well, it's primarily an action game that combines hack and slash gameplay with some third-person shooting, where you are in control of a nimble advanced battle mech called Jehuti, an orbital frame fueled by a newly discovered mysterious substance called Metatron. The story focuses on the struggles that arose in relation to the people of Earth migrating and colonizing space, specifically the conflict between Earthlings and the migrants who have settled on Mars and Jupiter's moons, and are referred to as the titular Enders due to living on the outer limit of the biosphere. In the PS2 games, however, we mainly focus on combating the Martian extremist resistance group called Barum, which were the original inventors of the orbital frame technology. If you know anything about the original Gundam anime, this all may sound familiar, especially the whole Earth versus colonists thing, and that's because Gundam was actually a big influence for the series as a whole. To try and separate it from all the other mecha franchises, they try to approach the design from a more realistic standpoint, even involving scientific researchers for robot anime to support their work with scientific facts. Now, a big part of why I enjoy Zone of the Enders so much is its focus on close-range combat, which, unlike the not that many mecha games that I played, felt quite unique, at least for its time. While it may be cool to see mechs outfitted with artillery double its size, that could nuke a whole country in seconds, to me, nothing beats the clanging action of big robots swinging large pieces of metal at each other while doing unrealistic acrobatics. There is actually one anime I watched that did a great job incorporating this exact type of action in its battles, and it was Iron-Blooded Orphans. Like many mecha anime, it is bogged down with overdrawn and confusing political stories, but when the fighting starts, you're usually in for an exciting showdown of devastating blows. Zone of the Enders may not fit that bill exactly, as you still use a beam sword and have a lot of ranged weaponry, though your normal shots are fairly weak and the other weapons use ammo, so you can depend on just spamming them. The melee combat isn't complex by any means either, but it serves as a great foundation, and most importantly, it's just satisfying to dash around and slice enemies in a more hack and slash environment. I realized that I essentially just won a character action game but with a mecha coat of paint, but hey, what's not cool about that? It's a real shame that this series never got a chance to really continue and further develop its combat system, as I think what is here is pretty decent and it only improves in the sequel. The last thing I want to mention before we properly get into the game are some of the key figures involved in the making of Zone of the Enders. Starting with Hideo Kojima, who a lot of people seem to mistakenly assume is the main creator behind the series. The truth is that he did not direct any of the games, but rather acted as the producer for the two PS2 games. It's difficult to say how big his involvement in the project was, but I think it's safe to assume that he acted more as a guide for the development team rather than create the ideas that would be implemented in the game, especially considering he'd be quite busy working on Metal Gear Solid 2 at the time. The true director, and I guess creator of the series, is Noriyuki Okamura, who also has a pretty extensive portfolio, having worked on games such as Policenauts, Tokimeki Memorial, and several Metal Gear games. These days, he seems to primarily work as a producer on many of Konami's games, having produced several spin-off Metal Gear games, most recently being the producer of the MGS3 remake. Okamura was also the writer of the first Zone of the Enders, though later on in development, he would be joined by Shio Murata, who would eventually end up directing the second Zone of the Enders game. But more on that later. Murata did also end up overseeing the CG cutscenes of the first game when they realized no one was put in charge of that yet. Another notable figure in the development of this game is the artist Yoji Shinkawa. Most famous for his work with Hideo Kojima, especially on the Metal Gear series, many of his ideas and sketches from his school days would be used as the basis for the mecha designs in this game, specifically the two main orbital frames, Jehuti and Anubis. It's clear that he had a big influence on the aesthetics of the game, and I'm a big fan of most of the mech designs in this series. Another artist who worked on this game was Nobuyushi Nishimura, who did extensive work as an animator in many anime, including several Gundam shows, as well as having worked on all mainline MGS games as either an animator or concept artist. Alright, let's not waste any more time and actually boot up the game to see what it has to offer. The story takes place in the year 2172 on a place called Antillia, a space colony that orbits Jupiter's moon Europa. A squadron of troops led by a woman called Viola is sent over to retrieve two newly developed orbital frames at any cost necessary. As they attack the colony in their search for the orbital frames, we cut to the protagonist of a story, a young boy named Leo Stenbach, who is running away through the battle-torn streets after witnessing his friends get crushed by a big robot. Eventually, he stumbles upon a hangar holding the very same orbital frame the attackers are looking for. He manages to stumble inside the orbital frame with the onboard AI called Ada greeting him. As we get our first look at Jehuti, the well-endowed orbital frame, we get into our first short fight against an enemy robot. After defeating it, Ada gives us a rundown on how to control this weapon of mass destruction, so let's go over the controls and mechanics of this game. Movement is done using the left analog stick. It can be a bit awkward getting used to controlling the camera, however, as it will snap to where Jehuti is facing whenever you let go of the stick. Moving up and down is done using triangle and X respectively. By pressing R2 when moving, you will perform a dash in whatever direction you are moving, and continuing to hold it will let you move around faster. The normal attacks are done with square and will change depending on how far you are from the targeted enemy. In long range, you will use your regular P shooter, while in close range you will perform a slashing combo. Attacking while dashing will also perform different moves that are dependent on distance, either shooting out a series of bullets or a thrust attack. While R2 makes you dash when moving, holding it when standing still makes Jehuti charge up and enter burst mode while doing so, which allows for two new attacks. Pressing square in burst mode creates a large ball of energy that you throw while in long range, and a spin attack when used at close range. These are generally your highest damaging attacks and can break through guards, but have long windups. R1 is your guard button, making Jehuti put up a shield to defend against frontal attacks. You can block through most attacks, excluding enemy burst attacks. Circle is your grab button. You can grab hold of enemies and throw them against surfaces or other enemies for extra damage. That's it for this tutorial section, but as you progress through the game and collect function modules, Jehuti will gain additional abilities and upgrades, so while we're at it, let's go over these two. L2 allows you to lock onto a specific enemy, which you can cycle between by pressing L2 again and pressing L1 to cancel it. The lock-on will also help you determine whether you are in short or long range, as it will be green when you are further away from the enemy and change to red when you get up close. The right analog stick allows you to move the camera, as well as the reticule used for aiming ranged weapons. It's not something you'll be using often, as you will mainly be stopping movement to reset your camera position or already be locked onto an enemy, but there are a couple sections where you will be required to aim manually. Also, you can escape from most battles by just undoing your lock-on and turning away from the enemy. You don't even need to run away. Just make sure no enemy is in the view of the camera, and a timer will start which will make all the enemies disappear when the countdown ends. The last thing in Jehudi's arsenal are the sub-weapons, which you will need to acquire drivers for throughout the game before you can use. They're most often some sort of ranged attack, which you can perform by pressing circle when in long range or not targeting an enemy. Unlike your normal ranged square attack, these will require you to have ammunition, which you can collect scattered around the levels or be dropped by enemies. If you see any items labeled as unknown around, this means that you haven't unlocked the respective sub-weapon yet, although you can preemptively collect ammo for it. You can change which sub-weapon you currently have equipped in the start menu or by pressing up and down on the D-pad. The first sub-weapon you will receive in the story is the Javelin, which essentially just lets you throw a seemingly high-tech javelin forward. Next up is Gazer, which gently sprinkles these diamond-shaped things that produce a laser outwards when hitting a surface. Bounder lets you create an energy ball that bounces off surfaces. Phalanx lets you shoot rapidly in a short cone in front of you. The strength of the firing rate can also be changed depending on how hard you press the circle button. If you weren't already aware, the PS2 and in fact the PS3 controllers both had analog or pressure-sensitive face buttons, although not that many PS2 games took advantage of them and even less PS3 games did. Halberd is described in-game as an energy sword, but it really is just a strong laser beam that continuously fires in front of you, but renders you unable to move while doing so. Comet is a slower moving shot that homes onto targets. Gauntlet might sound like something that lets you fistfight enemies, but in reality is just a really fast shot forward. But it is still one of the more powerful sub-weapons. Sniper is pretty much just your simple old-fashioned sniper rifle. Not incredibly strong, but lets you shoot things from far away, and is the only time you'll probably be using the crosshair to aim. It's also one of the 2 necessary sub-weapons to progress the game. Decoy, again as its name implies, creates a hologram of Jehudi which will briefly confuse the enemy, but will be destroyed upon a single attack. It too is necessary to finish the game, but can also be quite useful in distracting some of the more challenging late game enemies. Last but certainly not least is Mummy, which is a big shield that heals you continuously as you hold it up. Overall, though these sub-weapons are really not that special and I rarely found myself really using most of them, as you can easily manage with just your normal abilities and you don't have to worry about the right ammo, they can be useful situationally, but besides Gauntlet and Mummy, it can be easy to forget about them. As for how the game itself is set up, it's a fairly linear story where you go to different locations on the colony to usually destroy enemies or collect items needed to progress. The areas you visit are fairly small and you will need to backtrack several times to pass locations to collect items, but besides the sub-weapons and a couple side missions, it's a pretty straightforward path. As you defeat enemies, the experience bar will eventually level up Jehudi up to level 8, which increases how much health you have and slightly increases your damage too. Enemies have levels as well, but as their level increases, in addition to the health and damage, they also gain new attacks and their AI significantly improves. For example, a level 1 enemy will probably just stand there doing simple actions and take hits, but a higher level one will block more, try to dodge out of your attacks, and have access to a larger arsenal of weapons and moves. Besides the bosses, there are only 3 types of enemies in this game. The most basic enemies you encounter are called Raptors, which have very similar attacks to your own Javelin, Gazer, and Bounder. Then you have a variant with these big mummy shields called Mummy Heads, which can attack with Phalanx and Halberd, and another more armored version of the Raptor called Cyclops, which has access to the Gauntlet. Despite there being a very small amount of enemy variety, the enemy levels make sure to keep the combat evolving and increase in difficulty without resorting to just throwing more enemies at you indiscriminately, as you will find yourself needing to switch up your strategy slightly when encountering higher level enemies. While it has some nuance to it, the combat is not incredibly complex, and you can get by most of the game by just mashing honestly, at least on normal. The atmosphere is on point however, and the music helps to sell it a lot, with well-fitting tracks and its great use of vocals for ambiance. The use of technopop for the game's soundtrack was also one of the few things specifically suggested by Kojima. And with that, we pretty much covered all the capabilities that Jehudi has and the game's base mechanics, so let's get back to the story. After that short study session, Ada points out to collect the nearby Metatron ore, which will allow it to repair any damage sustained to the frame. In the game, Metatron is the special substance that was discovered on one of Jupiter's moons, and is what's used to power the orbital frames. Despite its incredible properties, not much is known about its true nature and effects. Once collected, you can follow the marker to leave the hangar and fight some more troops, after which Viola joins the battle herself. Just hit her a few times and she will be ordered to retreat from her embarrassing performance. While Leo is pathetically curled up in the frame, Ada patches in a communication attempt from someone called Elena Weinberg, who is one of the commanders of the civilian transportation company called Atlantis. She tries to calm Leo down and asks him to deliver Jehudi to them so they can take it to Mars for an upcoming battle, since the original pilot seems to have already perished. Despite Leo's strong opposition to the idea, he eventually agrees to help Atlantis in order to avoid more lives being lost and the destruction of his colony. He does, however, make it very clear he will not be made to kill anyone in the process. Leo picks up a function module to upgrade Jehuti's currently limited capabilities as some more troops arrive to patrol, blissfully unaware of our presence. You can fight them if you want, but our current objective is to find the flight module so we can escape this area. Unfortunately, it seems the module has been password protected and we need to locate the enemy that has the passcode first. The enemy will be marked, so just defeat them and return to collect your flight mode module, which will allow Jehuti to do a small transformation and move areas to a sort of an overworld of the game, where you can fly between the available areas. Originally, all orbital frames in the game were supposed to feature a flight mode, where the whole frame transforms into a more aerodynamic shape, although in the end, due to how satisfying just normally flying around and skating on the ground was, the team decided not to go in that direction, and flight modes and orbital frames ended up being either scrapped or barely featured. Also, I can't talk about this game without mentioning the massive shafts that act as the orbital frame's cockpit. This phallic design was no accident, as the designs for Jehuti date back to Shinkawa's school sketches, where he drew what essentially became the game's main orbital frame, and he just thought the idea of having a literal cockpit was funny. While I was never a big fan of how this part of the mech's design looked like, I gotta respect the shitpost. Once we leave the hangar area, Leo notices more fighting going on in the residential district and rushes in to help. He notices his apartment building has been destroyed, and we get a bit of unintentional comedy with Leo sounding like he's disappointed with the idea that his father could still be alive.
Father?
I detect no human activity.
You mean everyone is dead?
That is a possibility, but it is more natural to assume the residents were previously evacuated.
Damn it.
While we're here, I might as well mention a bit about the voice acting in this game. It's about what you expect from a PS2 game, with most of it being okay at best.
Selvis! That is you! Isn't it, Selvis? Are you alright, Selvis?
Leo specifically has some really awkward delivery, and it doesn't help that he's already a pretty whiny character. Not that it's completely unfounded given his situation, but the script definitely had a lot of room for improvement as well. The development team didn't seem to think so, however, as apparently they were so impressed with the English dub that it became the reason they didn't include the Japanese version in the international release. Anyway, back to the story. Leo then notices a lone girl running away who turns out to be his friend Selvis. While they argue about going to check the church for survivors, the enemy orbital frame starts shooting at us, and we get into our first boss battle against Tempest. It's a pretty easy boss fight, but you are limited to only ranged attacks. For the first phase, just use your normal shots on his jellyfish head, and be careful of the flamethrower attack he does. Try to find that sweet spot where you avoid his attack, but he continues trying anyway. After he goes down to about half health, his head will break and he'll reveal his true ugly mug. Here you can get right up to his face and spam burst attacks for high damage. He will occasionally hide his head and fly up into the sky, where he is pretty much invulnerable, so just wait for him to come back and expose his weak point again. After destroying Tempest, Ada initiates a lock-on to eliminate the surviving pilot. However, Leo strongly protests against it. As the two bicker about what to do, the enemy pilot ejects from his frame and escapes. This is one of the many disputes Leo has with Ada, as the latter approaches situations in a more logical and calculated manner, unlike Leo, who is mainly driven by his unstable emotions. The two do manage to develop personal growth over time, learning from each other as Leo begins to accept some of the realities of war as he gains more confidence, while Ada slowly begins to understand human nature more. Selvis runs out of the church alone, meaning her big risky quest of trying to save the kids was meaningless, and she gets approached by one of the enemy troops before Leo comes in with Jehuti to save her, and she climbs into the cockpit. We can leave the area now, but before you do, you can destroy the enemy with a passcode which will allow you to access the driver for the first sub-weapon, the Javelin. Leo and Selvis make up for their argument earlier as they fly out of the area and notice another residential district of the colony being under attack. Ada interrupts to remind Leo of his mission objective to return Jehuti to Atlantis, but also knows that the colony has lost control of its airspace, meaning that we have to return to the factory so they can transplant more information from a local server, in order to reach their destination, avoiding as much combat as possible. A news report then plays covering the grim situation happening on Antillia, and confirms the name of the attacking group as Baram, whose forces are making it difficult for the nearby hospital to continue functioning. Selvis asks Leo if he could go and help out the civilians, although Ada strongly protests, calling these actions illogical and dangerous due to Leo's inexperience as a pilot. Despite her objections, she still marks the hospital for us, and we are left with a choice of how to proceed. This is the first in a set of optional SOS rescue missions where you need to destroy all the enemies in the area without destroying any buildings, especially ones with civilians in them. When you defeat all enemies, you will get a letter rank based on your performance. All this really affects is your final rank at the end of the game, as it features a very Metal Gear Solid style of final ranking, which takes into account your continues, saves, playtime, enemies defeated, and how well you performed in the rescue missions. The final rank you can achieve is also apparently capped based on what difficulty you're playing on, with easy being capped at C, normal at B, hard at A, and very hard at S. While we're on the topic of different difficulties, let's actually go over what they affect in this game, as it's a lot more than your usual enemies hit harder and are spongier. In general, the higher the difficulty, the higher level enemies' frames will be, and bosses will have more health. But there is more that each difficulty offers. On easy, using a continue will fully refill your energy and even grant you extra sub-weapon ammo. You also gain extra experience from destroyed enemies. Normal is pretty much the same, but you don't get the extra sub-weapon ammo or the extra experience. Hard difficulty doesn't restore your health to full after a continue, and enemies stop dropping healing items as well. The worst part is, this is when destroying buildings starts actually decreasing your experience gained. And with how easy it is to have buildings blow up either because of enemies or your own stray shots, this will make leveling up a lot more difficult. Very hard adds to that by just straight up decreasing how much experience you get in general. Back to the game, we complete the SOS mission and destroy an enemy which has a passcode for a new weapon. After locating the terminal with the program, we unlock our second sub-weapon, Phalanx, after which we return to the factory to sync with the server. There we locate the enemy with the passcode to the server, but notice that there is an asterisk next to the enemy group level. This lets you know that there is a leader amongst the group, which if defeated, will decrease the level of the remaining enemies to 1 and put them on low HP. You can identify the leader by the same asterisk when battling the group. After retrieving the password, we go sync with the local server, and Ada instructs us to leave the area. She informs us that Bahram has taken control of the colony's EPS system, which fuels all the flying objects in the colony using microwave energy, and Bahram has used to essentially create a big shield that would fry anyone trying to enter its field. We have to destroy the 2 antennas that are radiating the EPS energy, as well as the shaft that is supplying them power. There is another rescue mission that appears at this point which we can complete, otherwise we need to travel to City 1 where we discover the shaft emanating a barrier we can't pass and our weapons are simply too advanced to reach the shaft's weak points. So we have to immediately leave in order to find some older and more primitive weaponry. Head to Town 2 where Ada detects a vector trap. She tries to explain it using some technical mumbo-jumbo, but as far as we're concerned, we need to destroy these spots floating around the town called porters, which will make an item appear. Apparently, this is the same type of technology that allows us to manifest our sub-weapons. You can't lock onto them, so they can be difficult to hit, but it's one of the few times where the right analog stick is useful. Once you destroy all the porters, an item box will appear which will contain your run-of-the-mill giant sniper rifle, which is your next sub-weapon. Returning back to City 1, with our new sniper in hand, we can use the right stick to aim and destroy the glowing spots on the rotating shaft. In the HD version of the game, they forgot to put some of the collisions so you can actually shoot the weak spots through the cylinder. Once we destroy the shaft, the EPS system switches to their emergency power supplies, weakening their field and allowing us to enter the facilities housing them. Before we leave though, we can pick up another passcode and unlock the Gazer sub-weapon. From there, we can go to EPS-1, where we can get another optional sub-weapon by destroying the porters, which will grant you the passcode to the weapon server. After which, we proceed to the tucked-away cave entrance to gain access to the EPS backup generator. Along the way, there are a few fights and a terminal behind the same EPS shield, but at the end of the tunnel, we find the generator, which we can destroy by shooting at it. Unfortunately, the terminal from earlier requires some passcode we don't have yet, so keep this place in mind and exit the cave to fly back to the overworld, since you can't exit an area through the menu if you're inside one of these sub-areas. We tried to do the same thing at EPS2, but when we entered this cave, there is another EPS barrier preventing us from even accessing the generator at all. As we leave, another group of enemies spawns, which we need to destroy to get one of the necessary passcodes to progress. As for the other one, you don't really get any hints, so are meant to go back and explore previous areas. Fly to Town 1, where Ada will point out there is an enemy with a reinforced program, represented by an S next to their level, similar to the ones we fought in EPS2. This signifies they are a stronger type of enemy, but they also happen to be holding the other passcode we need, so we destroy them before returning back to EPS1. There we can go back to the server terminal we noted earlier and unlock the Raptor control module, allowing us to take control of unmanned orbital frames. Don't get too excited, as this is just for story purposes and you can't really take control of enemy troops in battle, as it's intended to be used on frames that aren't already being controlled. These unmanned frames are however not affected by the EPS microwaves, so could potentially help us in getting through the barrier at EPS2. Sylvie says she saw one that was undamaged that we could use, but isn't nice enough to share the location with us. Well, we have to backtrack to Town 2 to around where we got our sniper sub-weapon. There we can find a relatively unharmed raptor, which we take control of and send to EPS2. Controlling the raptor is pretty similar to controlling Jehuti. You still have access to burst attacks, although you are significantly weaker overall, so avoiding combat is recommended here. You will have some small force battles when you're on the ground, as the enemies can still detect you, but these are only against one enemy at a time, so are simple to get through. As you continue onwards, you'll most likely reach a dead end, so backtrack and explore more of the facility until you obtain the detector program, which will allow you to see some invisible objects. As you leave the room, you will notice some porters appear thanks to the new detector program. Destroying these will net you a Metatron core if you need some healing. Otherwise, go back to the dead end, where we'll be able to see a crack in the wall with the detector, which we can hit with a burst shot to break through. Then just destroy the generator like last time, and we leave our little raptor friend confused and in a lot of trouble. With the EPS field down, we can proceed further down the colony. Another rescue mission pops up with Town 3 needing some help, which we try to. Then continue onwards to the mountain area. Ada points out the factory where Jehuti was developed for no reason at all, I'm sure really, before getting shot down by a mysterious frame. Ada starts acting very strangely, calling the massive frame in front of us a raptor and saying we can totally defeat it before completely shutting down like a toy with a dying battery.
Certainly, your irrational actions have driven this frame into a crisis.
There is not much you can do here, so just leave the area and Leo discovers that Jehuti has been infected with a virus. Thankfully, Ada told us of the factory Jehuti was made in, so our next objective is to go there to hopefully find some sort of vaccine. We do have another rescue mission with City 2, although if you try to attempt it, you will notice your health being permanently low due to the virus. If you do decide to tackle this side mission though, all the enemies are pretty weak, so it's actually one of the easier SOS missions to get a higher rank on, since your combat abilities haven't been affected even in this state and all the civilians are on these tiny helicopters which are easy to avoid. You can also destroy the porters for a passcode to the nearby Comet sub-weapon. Heading for Factory 2, there you just want to do a mad dash for the underground side area as the enemies here are a lot stronger than in the SOS mission and you still only have 1 HP. Inside there will be a single raptor who will drop the pass upon defeat, which you can use to interact with the terminal and acquire the virus vaccine. Ada deletes the infected modules and even apologizes to Leo, which really seems to surprise him. There is another terminal here for a decoy module, but we don't have the necessary passcodes yet, so just remember this location for later. Leave the factory and Ada will conclude that Jehuti is still not ready to fight against the giant orbital frame that attacked us, and we need to find more upgrade modules. She does inform us of the final SOS mission in the game, with the enemy attacking the colony shaft in City 1. There is actually a little no extra piece of dialogue here if you get 100% of the buildings destroyed, as Ada will note how the axis of the colony has irreversibly shifted, and the whole structure will now crash into Jupiter's moon Europa within a few years, meaning you essentially caused more damage to the colony than the literal terrorists did, so it's actually better to do nothing at all than try to help like this. Whether you decide to help or not, we have a bunch more backtracking to do, starting with City 2, where there is an enemy that has the first decoy passcode. Next, we go to Town 3, where there are some more invisible enemies roaming around, and Ada advises us to leave and find a way to deal with that first, as we can't lock on to invisible enemies. You can still kind of see them and even damage them, but obviously without a lock on, it's a major pain. So we leave and go to EPS2 instead to find the raptor we previously controlled and used to acquire the detector module upgrade. The poor little raptor has been working out, raising his levels, and now finally gets a chance at his revenge for the manipulation it has suffered, or just get blown up and we recollect our detector module. As you leave the underground area, you will notice some more invisible porters, which you can destroy for the passcode for the optional sub-weapon Gauntlet. With our new old upgrade, we can return to Town 3 and finally deal with the enemies there properly and obtain the remaining passcode. With both codes in hand, we again return to Factory 2, where we got the vaccine and can finally get the decoy device driver, which is the second sub-weapon necessary to progress. With that, we are now ready to return to Park 1 and battle against the boss, Tyrant. Again, it's not a tough fight, just keep shooting at him and remember to use decoy whenever he locks onto you. Most of his attack patterns are fairly easy to avoid, but just like the other bosses, after dealing enough damage, he will transform and gain new attacks, tearing through all the surrounding buildings, which has to really sting on higher difficulties with the XP loss. But either way, there isn't much to say about this, just keep shooting until he goes down, and with him, the unmanned raptors he was controlling also cease functioning. The pilot again tries to eject himself to safety, but Ada has given up trying to reason with Leo, and they let him escape. Before you continue with the story, you'll want to revisit the location where you just fought the boss in order to pick up the optional sub-weapon Mummy. The healing it provides will surely be useful for the upcoming fights. Once ready though, depart for the final location of the game, the mountain. The story starts picking up again as we get another call from Elena of Atlantis patching us to the person who will be picking up Jehudi from us, Rock Thunderheart. Yes, that's really his name. Though he is very apprehensive about having a literal child pilot a super weapon, he gives us an overview of what's the situation on the colony and tells us to meet him in the Metatron warehouse, though this does mean we will have to fight some more. Leo, frustrated with being their delivery boy who has been dragged into a war, starts throwing a bit of a tantrum, thinking that the crew of Atlantis is just another heartless group focused on winning no matter the sacrifices. He does calm down a little bit after learning that the original pilot of Jehudi was Thunderheart's best friend and Elena's boyfriend, with them reiterating the importance of this mission. He then apologizes and accepts his mission. There's actually a secret bad ending you can trigger here. If you let all the civilians die and failed every SOS mission, which you would need to go very out of your way to accomplish, once Thunderheart starts speaking, an explosion will be heard and Ada will confirm his death. The cause of the explosion was Jehudi destroying one of the underground lifelines, meaning your actions directly caused his death. You will then get an early game over screen where Ada berates Leo and you will be kicked out to the main menu. Back to our playthrough, the mountain is protected by troops who try to shoot at us, so we need to move low through the nearby gully to approach the warehouse safely. Inside the stage itself, you will notice the map is a lot larger than any of the previous locations, but it's still a pretty linear path for the most part. As you travel through the ravines, enemies will pop out of nowhere to attack you, but there is a lot of healing items and sub-weapon ammo around to keep you topped up throughout. If you keep going straight on the path you start in, you will also be able to collect the passcode for the final sub-weapon of the game, Bounder. Besides that, it's a pretty straightforward path with a few spots you need to use your burst shot to create a way forward, though these places are marked on your map. Once you make it through and inside the dam, another orbital frame called Nebula will fly in for a boss fight. Once again, you will have to rely on ranged weaponry for this one. The battle itself isn't all too difficult though, just keep moving around to avoid his attacks and continue shooting. He will occasionally hide behind the environment preparing for an attack, after which you'll have a window to do some burst shots for extra damage. Like all the other bosses, he will transform and enter phase 2 when down to about half health. He will now hide up in the air, but the strategy is the same for the most part. You will have to shoot at the head for a bit before his tail pit, I guess, becomes targetable, where you can deal the real damage. Nebula blows up non-lethally, and we get a call from Thunderheart, who Leo has already forgotten. He tells us where to go next, Leo whines some more, and we get prompted to save. Viola gets contacted once again by her commander and leader of Barum, Noman, who has acquired Jehudi's sister frame Anubis and is enjoying its power. Meanwhile, Viola has completed 50% of her repairs and is eager to have a rematch with us. I guess those 5 hits we did at the beginning of the game on her really did a number on her frame.
Noman tries to calm her down and even offers her his previous frame Selkis, which he has no need for anymore.
Jehudi enters the warehouse, but instead of Thunderheart, we are greeted by Viola, who tries to gaslight Leo into thinking he caused his friend's death at the beginning of the game. As their blades clash, Viola further provokes Leo, and we get into our boss fight against Nath. Very early into the battle, Viola will catch you in some sort of a restraint which will trigger a cutscene where Ada enables the emergency escape option for Leo, after which she plans to self-destruct Jehudi. Our favorite contrarian, Leo, once again stops her and argues against it, mainly because he doesn't want to see Jehudi or Ada destroyed. But he does eventually manage to successfully escape the restraints by himself, somehow. From then on, the battle continues as normal. We finally get a proper boss fight where you don't just spray bullets from a distance. In fact, Nath is quite good at blocking your attempts at ranged attacks, so you'll need to get in close with your blade to do some proper damage. She's got a pretty similar moveset to Jehudi, so your safest bet is to wait for her to do some big attack like a burst shot and get in with a dash stab while she's recovering. She can deal a lot of damage, so it's better to play more defensively here, and if you picked up the mummy sub-weapon, the extra healing is really helpful. Overall, I think this is a pretty fun fight and my personal favorite in this game. Once we defeat Nath, another cutscene plays where Leo nearly finishes Viola himself but stops last second. As he leaves, Ada once again reprimands him for being illogical and refusing to escape when they were restrained, stating that next time she will not hesitate to eject the cockpit. We then get to meet Thunderheart in person, who informs us that Barum is planning to blow up the entire colony. He then asks Leo to pilot Jehudi again so he can disarm the bombs, as he admits Leo is a more skilled pilot than he originally gave him credit for, after seeing his battle with Nath. Leo, with his newfound courage, decides to do what he believes is right and risk his life once again to save the people of the colony. Nah, just kidding. He whines some more and starts crying. Our passenger princess Sylvise shows a lot more courage though, and starts encouraging Leo to help them out, having confidence that Leo can complete the task, and she even offers to join him. This touching moment gets cut short, however, as the screen goes red and a bullet pierces through Sylvise. The shooter is revealed to be Viola, who manages to also disarm Thunderheart. As Sylvice's words ring in Leo's ears, we get to see the extent of her damage. Aw, that barely scraped her. She'll be fine. As Viola scoots away in the palm of a raptor, Leo leaves Sylvice in Thunderheart's care as the events give him the courage to re-enter Jehudi. While we travel up to the spaceport, Ada asks to have a chat with Leo. She questions why he continues to pilot Jehudi despite the success chance of their mission being so low and his numerous requests to be replaced as the pilot. She wonders of plausible reasons such as Leo overestimating his ability, the potential reward, or simply revenge, but concludes whatever his reason is, it's illogical. Leo isn't sure himself what drives him, but Ada, despite essentially being a lifeless computer program, shows genuine concern for him and even points out it's not too late to go back, outright saying she does not want him to die. Leo then tells Ada a story about his lonely childhood, how he was neglected by his parents who would rarely be home, but specifically recounts a family dinner they had when he was 10, to I guess celebrate his father being posted to Jupiter. While Leo was very excited about the dinner, the evening was ruined by his parents arguing over who would take Leo. But they weren't arguing about who would get to keep him, no. They both wanted to get rid of him. This here is some unintentional comedy gold. You have this Shinji archetype character, arguably even more pathetic than Shinji, who whines in your ear for the whole game and then you drop this bombshell? Like, yeah, understandable. Have a fantastic day. But hey, this whole thing would justify Leo's reaction near the beginning of the game where he sees his apartment building on fire. Now, to be more serious, it's not like characters like Leo or Shinji aren't justified in their behavior. In both cases, they had a pretty shitty life and clearly a lack of positive role models to help them grow. And also, they're still literally children who were expected to take part in war, piloting weapons of mass destruction. But as a player, you're not really going to be thinking about that, but rather be distracted by the annoying, squeaky whining that you've been subjected to the entire game. It also doesn't help that his whole monologue has that vague, cartoonish, depressing outlook of everyone hates me for absolutely no reason at all. But it does end in him finding value in his own life and realizing the friendship he has with Sylvice and even Ada, finally feeling like he is needed for something and is willing to devote his life to protect that. As they reach their objective, Ada once again shows concern for Leo and tells him to be careful. Viola refuses her orders to retreat, wanting to battle against Leo again, but before we do, we have to go through the worst section of the game where you have to grab onto bombs for several seconds to stop them from blowing up the colony. You have about a minute to deal with each bomb after it appears, but throughout the whole thing, enemies will spawn which can hit you out of your hold or just straight up blow up the bomb, dealing massive damage. Ideally, just finish off the enemies and you should still have enough time to detonate the bomb safely. Feel free to unload all your sub-weapons as well, as you won't really need them after this point. It's not the hardest thing ever, but with the added time limits, it can be quite frustrating. After dealing with all the bombs, we have essentially the true final boss fight of the game against Zombie Nath. Her frame looks quite messed up after our last battle, and overall, this is an easier fight than before. She has access to some different moves, but you just want to get up close and keep slashing. You deal a lot more damage this time around as well, so it shouldn't be a long fight. Once you deplete her health bar, Leo shoots out a final burst shot, which causes her to break through the colony window and begin falling towards Jupiter. As Viola's lifeless frame descends faster, Leo asks if there is a way that he could save her. Ada states that while not impossible, Jehudi is not built to resist Jupiter's magnetic storm, and the attempt would be incredibly dangerous. Before Leo even has a chance though, Viola tells him to stop, seeing his help as an insult and claiming that if she does survive, she will continue to hunt him down and those close to him. In her emotional final moments, she reveals more details about her own difficult life, the sacrifices she had to make along the way, the loneliness from losing everyone she cared about, living only to survive and surviving only by her own skill alone.
To be beaten by someone like Leo,
who denies her entire existence, is the ultimate shame, and she is ready to end her ill-fated days. Before passing, however, she has one final question for Leo, asking him if she was strong, to which Leo replies that he is lucky to even be alive. Looking at the stars one last time, she mentions the name Radam, who you may want to keep in mind for a future video. As Viola disintegrates, we experience some sort of interference and a mysterious new frame teleports behind us like it's nothing personnel, kid. Jehudi seems to resonate with this frame, which Ada identifies as Anubis, but advises we escape as we are not capable of defeating it and we are apparently not even destined to meet yet. Anubis is piloted by No Man, the leader of Barum and the man responsible for the events of this game. Wanting to test out his new orbital frame, he decides to take revenge on Leo for eliminating Viola, and as Ada said, we cannot defeat him. You are expected to lose this section, but as I pointlessly try to fight back, let's finally talk a little bit about the two main frames of this series. As Ada pointed out, Anubis is essentially just another Jehudi, but better, at least for the moment. The two frames were made in a set and do share a lot of visual similarities, though Anubis has larger disconnected wings, a cable-like tail, and a spear. The names of both frames also reference Egyptian deities, with Anubis obviously being named after the Egyptian god of essentially death, who has the head of a jackal, which is also referenced in the design of the heads for both frames. Jehudi, on the other hand, seems to be based on the alternate name for the Egyptian god of moon and wisdom, Thoth. The naming convention was also extended to Viola's frame Neith, which is named after the Egyptian goddess of war. I already mentioned how Jehudi and Anubis were created from Shinkawa's school day sketches, but Anubis was actually the first one he drew, and even back then he intended it to be called Anubis. Jehudi, on the other hand, came second and was originally called Fortune. They're both absolutely amazing designs, and it's crazy to me how these came from just some old sketches to fully realized game models and even model kits. Unfortunately, in this game, we are absolutely denied our final epic battle, and without even being able to leave a scratch on Anubis, we get constrained again. Elena calls with a plan to blow a hole for us to escape through. Waste some more time, you can't really die here, so you don't even need to worry about trying to dodge any attacks, and after a while, you will automatically escape, triggering the final cutscene. Leo manages to fly out of the colony and inside Atlantis' ship, finally completing his delivery of the frame. Selvice is revealed to be alright, and Ada thanks Leo. Leo asks if Ada wants to hang out after her mission on Mars is over, but Ada reveals that the plan is for Jehudi to self-destruct inside Barm's fortress. Leo is upset upon hearing that, especially after Ada told him not to throw his own life away, but as Ada shuts down, she confirms that that is her purpose for living. As credits roll, Leo joins up with Elena, Thunderheart and the bedridden Selvice, and with that, we have completed the story of Zone of the Enders for the PlayStation 2. Yeah, it was pretty underwhelming, rug pulling the final battle from in front of you with a sequel bait send-off. I've seen some articles claiming that the team originally never planned for a sequel, which I find crazy to believe considering this ending, but I'm going to assume that they meant it more as a sequel wouldn't be made if the game didn't perform somewhat well, rather than they considered this to be a complete story. Despite the crazy return rate of the game, the sales were enough to get a sequel made, and thank God because it improves so much in this game. As much as I enjoyed the original Zone of the Enders, it is a game with many flaws. But the worst part is that it feels more like a tech demo than a full game. This whole casual playthrough took me only around 4 hours to beat, and the story here is already so thin and incomplete. It's got some decent bits, but for the most part the voice acting is subpar, and despite the 3D models of the mechs and environments looking great, the human characters look like they were ripped from a PS1 game. For most people, if they say they like Zone of the Enders, they probably mean the sequel more, so it's not hard to see why so many people would have been unsatisfied enough to return it, especially having to pay full price for what is essentially demos of 2 games. Now, there is definitely some replayability to this game. There's the other difficulties, and you have your final rank at the end of the game, which you can try to get a better score in. Not that it unlocks anything, unfortunately, besides a different voice line at the end from one of the game's characters. And you can also get a different ending theme if you get A rank or above. There is, however, one more mode in this game which is a lot more interesting. After beating the game once, you will unlock Versus mode, which will let you play 1v1 battles as several of the orbital frames from the game against another player or CPU. You can also unlock this early by inputting the code you see now on the start screen. This will also unlock the remaining 2 characters and stages, which otherwise can be unlocked by beating the game for a second time. It's a small thing, but it's pretty fun being able to play as some of the enemies from the game, as well as both versions of Neith. And you can also adjust the level of the frames for different challenges. Of course, they don't even let you play as Anubis here because he is safe for the sequel that isn't planned. But otherwise, a solid and fun addition to the game. This about wraps it up for this game. Despite its flaws, this was still an enjoyable experience, and it set the foundation for what was about to come. While it may be a simple game, it still was a lot of fun flying around and clashing attacks with enemies. If you get the chance, I would recommend playing it yourself. I'm actually kinda glad this game wasn't much longer than it is, as I feel it does enough to not become fully stale, and its short length makes it more easily replayable. But with this chapter of the story complete, join me in the next video as we see how a new direction evolved the franchise with Zone of the Enders 2. Thank you for watching this video to the end. If you enjoyed it, subscribe for more videos like this, including several more Zone of the Enders videos coming soon. Leave a like, comment, share with your friends, all that stuff, and I'll see you all in the next one. Take care for now.